The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
As our next guest points out, Davos is a great place to drive home an important point about being in the crypto business. CoinDesk's Chief Content Officer Michael Casey caught up with Circle CEO Jeremy Allaire for this conversation about the ups and downs in the crypto journey and the road to regulatory clarity ahead. Let's watch.
Hi, Michael Casey, Chief Content Officer at CoinDesk. I'm here with Jeremy Allaire, who probably really doesn't need much of an introduction, the CEO and founder of Circle. Jeremy, you're in Davos. This is not your first Davos rodeo. You've been here a few times. But I think the context of this one from the crypto perspective is pretty interesting. We're coming out of an extremely difficult moment for this industry. Still a bit of a presence on the promenade here of one of the key players, including Circle right here. But you coming at this from a pretty different perspective, I would say, than your sort of classic crypto exchange. You, of course, the issuers of USDC. You're stuck in these important conversations about stablecoins, the future of the dollar, the future of fiat currencies. Tell me what your initial reflections are on conversations you've had.
Yeah, I think, like you said, we really come at this from a very different vantage point, which is we've always been interested in how do we take what we think of as traditional money, government debt money, reserve currency money, and how do we express that in digital currency and enable it to transact with the benefits of blockchains, right? The superpowers of the internet, as I like to say. And that still resonates, right? Because ultimately that is a conversation about how do we create more utility for the dollar and other currencies like euro. How do we provide an open programmable surface for money on the internet, and how do we create regulatory structures and policy structures to support that, and the development of that is like a new global financial market infrastructure. And so that's a very different conversation than how should we regulate trading exchanges for crypto tokens. And so our conversations are just, I think, very, very different, and they have been over the years. And so, yes, the conversations here are also, what are the reflections, what can we learn, based on either market failures or regulatory failures. There are a lot of ways people talk about that, but for us, this is I think it's a slightly different moment, than for many other actors.
So obviously, back in the US and presumably here as well, you do have conversations with US policymakers about this ongoing the future of the stablecoin regulation, which of course is in some respects a battle between what an existing sort of banking-led model is and then the model that you guys have, and that's an ongoing conversation. But I wonder, here in this sort of more international setting, what is the response you get from, say, leaders of developing countries? Because there is some concern that if Circle were to be successful, which you already are, but if it were to become phenomenally successful, and stablecoins, whether the dollar could just spread everywhere, that we get this sort of dollarization impact around the world. And remember that negative response that we had amongst monetary policy makers to, say, Libra when it came from Facebook, formerly Facebook, now Meta. What is the response to you guys, this idea of dollar-backed or euro-backed stablecoins sort of being used in those sort of countries?
Well, I think there is obviously a lot more conversation here about currency competition, and the geopolitical situation has created a structural shift where there's just more countries are more focused on bilaterally what kind of currencies they might use. We've seen some share shift in terms of international settlements, and so there is a focus on that. I wouldn't say there's a focus on what happens if stablecoins got larger. Dollarization, as right, already exists.
Regardless,
and in fact, the kind of interventions that have happened in the dollar infrastructure as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine have sort of posed a lot of broader. Geopolitics is now and currency politics is very much alive and well. But I think on that topic specifically, I think. Whether it's finance ministers, central bank leaders from different markets around the world, I think there's an understanding that digital dollars are going to be free-floating instruments on the internet, and that they'll be used in international transactions and as a store of value. But I think there's also an interest in seeing similar stablecoins issued in other markets. And so in some ways the normalization in, say, let's call it the G20 of a consistent model for the supervision of stablecoin issuing, that actually will advance the cause of having more fiat-backed stablecoins that are well-structured, well-supervised in a consistent manner, so that market regulators, whether you're in South Africa or the Philippines or Japan or the EU, knows how to deal with these different types of assets. In fact, Japan very recently indicated that they've created a way for these digital asset companies to support digital currencies like USDC natively in their markets, and it's one of the first major regulators to sort of say, hey, this is a dollar instrument in our market, and yes, we're going to have yen instruments as well.
Okay, so not real hostility there, which I suppose is interesting. So, again, this moment in time, crypto, one of the stories that's emerging is how do we get away from the sort of, some people describing it as the token casinos almost that we saw, and start talking about real utility, real use cases. And the thing that's interesting about what I think has happened in the last year or so with USDC is this sort of proliferation of people actually building on it and working with that as a payment vehicle in different parts of the world. Maybe give us a bit of a flavor of what you're seeing in particularly most recently in terms of those kind of use cases.
Absolutely. So, we've always been focused on how do we create utility value with this infrastructure, and how do we create utility value with money on the internet. And we think about USDC and our broader kind of stablecoin infrastructure as an internet platform that people can build on and developers can build on, and that's been part of its success. Is it's just this open dollar protocol on the internet, and so we've seen all kinds of growth. So a lot of proliferation in remittance applications, a lot of proliferation in even B2B settlements, payroll applications on a global basis where you're doing payouts to a wide variety of employees that want to be able to take dollar value. We're seeing FX applications emerge. So we've started to see on-chain FX markets where you've got multiple stables, and USDC is sort of a core settlement currency that's there, and that's a kind of necessary precondition to a lot of other things. We're seeing increasingly in markets where they actually have regulation around things, what we call security tokens, but basically, tokens that are used for investments or lending. USDC is being built into those financial market primitives in a lot of different places as well. And even, I think one of the most exciting things in December, we announced with the UNHCR a whole initiative to distribute humanitarian aid to refugees in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine now, where they're able to distribute to people who don't have bank accounts directly into digital wallets that take USDC. And then through a partnership with MoneyGram, they can actually cash out if they need local currency, or they can transact with it directly. And so humanitarian aid is a use case which is very, very powerful for this as well.
Okay. So it's 2023, it's 10 years since Circle was founded. And looking back at the company's performance over that time, it's been quite a wild ride.
It has.
Maybe at this particular interesting moment for crypto, what are the lessons you've learned? I mean, you just maybe walk us through the various iterations of Circle. And what you've learned.
Yeah, there's a lot in the 10 years. I'll try and break it down in 60 seconds. Yes. Look, when we started the company 10 years ago, what I told my employees and I told my investors is we had a vision for what could become possible with blockchains and digital currency and the like. And my view is it's 10 to 20 years. It's a long journey. So we're kind of at the midpoint of the original ideas. I think it's a longer journey than 20 years even. But I think the iterations, right? We started by trying to create a way you could take dollars and pounds and euros and transmit them as digital currency, but using Bitcoin as the settlement layer. And that, I think there were challenges with Bitcoin scaling and Bitcoin as a transmission mechanism. And so we made a decision once the technology evolved to to rebuild that on top of Ethereum, and that was the creation of USDC. But meanwhile, we had built one of the best engines in the world for Bitcoin liquidity, and we built a significant scale trading business. We acquired an exchange, we sold an exchange. We in the heart of the last crypto winter, we divested all of our trading businesses and put 100% around how do we build up infrastructure around USDC, and then, I think after the pandemic hit, have seen that obviously explode.
Yeah.
And so, what's interesting is you go through all that period, some of the lessons, consistently walk in through the front door with regulators, seek to be held to a high standard, always try and work with the best kind of fiduciary kind of status supervision, full transparency, and really that culture of trust and transparency, and that plays itself out, pays dividends, and it matters.
Even as you're pivoting all the way as you go, right?
You have to be able to pivot. As I like to say, and actually it's a good backdrop here in Davos, is it's climbing a mountain, right? And building something like this is climbing a mountain. You can see the mountaintop right over there. It's a beautiful mountaintop. But you don't know how you're going to get to the top of the mountain. And in fact, you're going to go up one part and you're going to be like, there's a cliff. I don't want to fall off. I got to pivot and go back down, and then I got to go back up. And so climbing a mountain is a really good metaphor, I think, for building anything great. And I think that's been, in some ways, the story of the past 10 years.
All right, well, let's look to because the mountain's a continual, perpetual climb, right? You never actually quite ever get to the summit.
It seems like.
Well, I think it's the nature of life and business, right?
Yeah.
2023, like, what's your thoughts here? And I think specifically, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned regulators. Clearly, there is still this stablecoin legislation that's been sitting there on the dock. There's a sense that in the post-FTX moment, there's a much more negative sort of position toward all aspects of this technology on the Hill. What is your outlook for that in particular, and sort of more broadly going forward for the space?
Yeah, so I have a different perspective than that. I think what's happening is that members of Congress are realizing that they better get even more educated, right? So there's kind of been this process of education, and obviously there was a huge investment within this industry of being president in DC, and there's been some scandals with that even potentially, but I think that people now understand, like, this is a live policy issue. This is not a put your head in the sand and hope it goes away. And so, yes, people will stake out maybe firmer positions in different places, but it does seem like within the G20 and then within the very specific leading countries, including the United States, there's a consensus view about the prudential supervision of stablecoin issuers. And so, and I think you're going to see, that's going to be normalized in almost every major market this year. And I think, what I like to call the McWaters bill is still the McWaters bill. It's just someone else has the gavel, and Congressman McHenry is very committed to working on this. And so obviously committees are being formed, and we'll see what emerges there. But as a lot of people like to say, within the digital asset regulatory landscape, sort of stablecoins are the lowest hanging fruit. It's the most straightforward. It's a foundational piece. And it's also, as evidenced by companies like Circle and USDC, these are becoming significant in size and business and deserve that kind of federal action.
Good. All right, well, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Jeremy Allaire, CEO of Circle.
Thank you, Michael.
That was Circle CEO Jeremy Allaire speaking with our Chief Content Officer Michael Casey here in Davos at the annual World Economic Forum.